Welcome back to 9.09er English. I'd like to begin by saying my sincerest apologies because the last few videos have only focused on IELTS candidates and we've been receiving emails saying, how come you don't have videos for OET candidates, PTE, TOEFL, and SELPIP candidates? That's why for our next two videos, we're making sure that no one is left behind because the content of the next two videos is basically applicable for all types of IELTS OET, PTE, TOEFL, SELPIP examinees. And what are our topics? This video will focus on phrasal verbs and the next one, idiomatic expressions. So, Sir Brian, please educate our viewers and subscribers. What are phrasal verbs to begin with?
Phrasal verbs are verbs with a particular particle. It can be a preposition, for example, or any other particle, and they can be two words only or multi-word phrasal verbs. And they're called phrasal verbs because they don't have the same definition or meaning as the real verb that is attached to the particle. So if you attach the particle to the verb, the meaning changes completely. This is already almost idiomatic in nature, and you need to be exposed to the language for you to be able to familiarize yourselves with the meaning of these phrasal verbs. And today we're going to touch on a few of them.
9.09er always innovates. Like 9.09er a year ago is totally different from the 9.09er that you know now. And rest assured that 12 months from now, we are an entirely different review center because we keep on pushing ourselves to the limits. We come up with new modules, new videos to make sure that we have always something new to offer. And speaking of something new, this handout has something new. And what is that? More than 50 phrasal verbs. Not just the phrasal verbs, but how or what's the meaning of this phrasal verb and how to use them in a sentence. But Sir Brian and I agree, if we're going to discuss more than 50, it might take like 3 hours and we don't want to bore you.
Of course.
Especially if others have relatively short attention span. So we'll try our best to keep this relatively short, like maybe 20 minutes, more or less. So I decided to pick 5 and Sir Brian 5 as well. Let's begin with Sir Brian's first choice. So what do we have here, Sir Brian?
One that I have chosen is very useful, and this is the phrasal verb call off. The meaning of that word is to cancel. For example, you could say the game was called off because of a medical emergency. This is something that you can use not only for IELTS, but also for other English exams, even for the OET, when you want to say that the appointment was called off because the doctor was not available. That is actually something that you can say to your interlocutor when you take your occupational English test.
Speaking of OET, some of you are obviously familiar with IELTS, knowing that it's the most popular high-stakes English examination worldwide. But what about OET, PTE, TOEFL, SELPIP? I'll just give you background before we proceed to my example. So what is OET? Occupational English Test. This is the preferred English examination for healthcare workers who have plans of going to USA, UK, Ireland, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. But you have to double check with your visa consultant or your employer if the program that you're applying for accepts OET. Now let's move on to PTE or Pearson Test of English. Recently, it has gained popularity because CGFNS now accepts PTE for visa screen application. So PTE has no paper-based version. At the same time, you cannot take this at home. The only version of PTE that you can take is the computer-delivered version, and there is no human intervention here as it's artificial intelligence that's going to assess your performance. TOEFL IBT is one of the oldest English examinations worldwide. It's an American product owned by ETS. No wonder why. TOEFL is widely recognized in the United States. But don't be fooled by that statement because there are also plenty of organizations outside of the USA accepting TOEFL IBT results in the same way. And the last one that I've mentioned, SELPIP, which stands for Canadian English Language Proficiency Index Program. The first letter, C, means Canada. implying that this examination is only accepted in Canada. So having said that, let's take a look at my first entry, and that is add up. When you hear the word add, that means you're going to come up with a sum. You're going to join two variables or factors or aspects together. It's just that the term add up, the phrasal verb add up, has an entirely different meaning, and that's what? To make sense or seem reasonable. So in order for you not to be confused, here's the sample sentence to enlighten you. Here we go. There were events in my life that did not quite add up. So in the context of that sentence, it means it's not something that seems logical or reasonable. So I'm done with my first entry. Let's go back to Sir Brian's entry number 2.
I have here a really interesting phrasal verb which has come across. The meaning of this is to meet someone or to find something by chance. And sometimes in IELTS, you're asked to talk about something that you found very randomly. So you could say you came across that particular item or that shop or mall or person. So you could probably say, I came across an antique shop where I bought this pendant.
I love that too. In fact, this is applicable for all examinees. Again, not just the IELTS candidates, because the ones preparing for other English examinations are quite jealous. How come 9.09 only focuses on IELTS? Now let's move on to my second example. Boils down to, or boil down to. The word boil, with the word boil, the first thing that comes to mind is like boiling point. Like when you increase the temperature of water until such time it reaches a boiling point. But when you put these three words together, boil down to, the meaning is to be summarized as. So let's take a look at the sample sentence. You can use it this way. It all boils down to who is more powerful. At the end of the day, it all boils down to who is more powerful. Now let's move on to the next example.
Here's the next one. Get rid of. This is also a multi-word phrasal verb, and the meaning of this is to eliminate. For instance, you could say, I had to get rid of all of the stuffed animals in my room because my roommate was allergic to them. So if you want to eliminate, discard, throw away, then you can actually say get rid of. You can also use this in your occupational English test when you're getting rid of a habit that is very bad for your health.
Now for my next example, die down. What's the key word here? Die. But if you're going to use this in English, it doesn't mean that someone literally passed away, right? So what's the meaning of die down? Okay, to calm down or to become less strong in intensity. And what's the sample sentence that we have for you? She knows well enough that it takes time for my anger to die down. Or when I got married recently, I used this in my speech, and I said when I proposed to my fiance that we're going to get married soon, we just waited for the pandemic to die down. It's not as if you can kill the pandemic or the pandemic is going to die, but it means to say we can put the situation under control, something like that. Let's move back to Sir Brian's example.
Next, we have keep up, which means to move or progress at the same rate. So if you haven't been able to keep up with someone or something, it means to say that you're lagging behind. So you can probably say it's hard to keep up when you're training with professional athletes.
For our next example, iron out. Iron out.
That.
The root word here is iron. So imagine when you're ironing clothes, right? You're like removing the wrinkles on the clothes. So the phrasal verb iron out means to resolve by discussion, or you're going to eliminate differences. Let's move on to sentence time. How to use this in a sentence. We met yesterday to iron out our differences.
What a beautiful phrasal verb.
I like that too. And by the way, whatever we're talking about right now is not just for writing and speaking. It will also help you in reading and listening. I think more of the reading sub this because
Yeah.
sometimes some
Mm.
candidates don't understand the sentence or the paragraph simply because there's this phrasal verb that they missed.
That's
So,
correct.
the more words you understand, but not just words,
Phrasal
verbs
verbs.
too, it will help you in identifying the correct answer, most especially for true, false, not given, or matching headings.
Okay, so let's go to the last word that I have in my list,
Mhm.
and this is look after. The meaning of this is to take care of. For example, you can say, I had to look after my grandparents when my parents died. So, look after is to take care of someone and to watch over those people.
I love that example. Now let's move on to my last entry, and it's to show off. So a lot of people love showing off, flaunting whatever they have. Let's begin with the meaning before we use it in a sentence. So what's to show off? To brag, or
Mhm.
you want to be admired, especially if you have an illusion of grandeur. You want to show off, I am this, I am
Mhm.
that, but that's not what you're supposed to do in English examinations. You don't use big words just to show off to the examiner that you have a vocabulary with a wide range of words. Now, what about the sample sentence? Let's take a look. He is always showing off his new car. Well, you can't go wrong with humility. And this is a word that Sir Brian and I love to talk about because we don't brag about our scores unless our scores are asked. But modesty aside, we've taken the examination multiple times and got the perfect grade in at least one of the two components. Now, this is not showing off, but this is just to establish credibility. So there you go, guys. We listened to you. We have a video that's applicable not just for IELTS, but also for the examinees of other English tests like OET, PTE, TOEFL, and SELPIP. But this is not the only video that's applicable for everyone. Our next video will focus on idiomatic expressions. In fact, we'd like to encourage you to invite young professionals or elementary and high school students, those who just want to improve the quality of their English. Because this video and the next one, well, they're applicable for everyone, not just for English exam test takers. Once again, we are 9.09er and watch out for our next entry.
Hi,
Bye.
guys.